I never thought love would find me again. Before you do anything else, stay here with me for a moment. Slow down. Let the noise outside your mind soften just a little. The dishes can wait. The messages can wait. The responsibilities you've carried for everyone else can wait too. Just for these few moments, allow yourself to be here. Because there is something I want you to hear. Something I think your heart has needed for much longer than you've admitted. And maybe nobody has ever said it to you quite this way. I know you are tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. Not the kind that disappears after a weekend or a vacation. I mean the deeper kind. The exhaustion that settles into a person's spirit after years of being strong. Years of showing up. Years of carrying things nobody noticed you were carrying. You became the reliable one. The understanding one. The patient one. The woman who kept moving even when part of her wanted to sit down and cry. And somehow life got used to that version of you. People got used to it too. They learned you could handle things. They learned you would survive. They learned you would continue. But very few people ever stopped to ask what surviving was costing you. Very few people noticed how much of yourself you quietly gave away. And I think that's where this story begins. Not with romance, not with destiny, not even with love. It begins with a woman who became so skilled at enduring that she forgot how much she deserved to be held. Emotionally, spiritually, tenderly. Tell me something. Have you ever walked through your home at night and felt the silence differently? Not because the house was empty, because something inside you felt empty. Have you ever stood in front of a mirror and looked at your reflection for a second longer than usual? Not criticizing yourself, not judging yourself, simply wondering where all the years went. Wondering how the young woman who believed so fiercely in love became someone who now approaches hope carefully, as if hope itself might hurt. I think many people misunderstand heartbreak. They think heartbreak is what happens when someone leaves. But often, the deepest heartbreak comes from what happens afterward, when life continues, when routines return, when everyone expects you to be fine, when you learn how to smile while carrying sadness nobody can see. That kind of heartbreak doesn't announce itself. It settles quietly into everyday life, into morning coffee, into empty chairs, into old songs you accidentally hear while driving, into birthdays, into holidays, into random Tuesday afternoons when a memory appears without warning. And maybe you've become so familiar with that ache that you've started believing it belongs there. Maybe you've carried it for so long that it feels like part of your identity. But I want to tell you something gently. That ache is not who you are. It is only evidence of how deeply you loved. There is a difference, a profound difference, because the world often teaches people to become smaller after disappointment, to protect themselves, to stop expecting too much, to lower their hopes, to close certain doors forever. And maybe you've tried. Maybe you've told yourself you don't need love anymore. Maybe you've convinced yourself that companionship belongs to younger people. Maybe you've whispered things like, it probably isn't meant for me, or that part of my life is over, or even, I've learned to be alone. But have you, truly? Or have you simply learned how to function while lonely? Those are not the same thing, not even close. Wait with me here, because this matters. There are women who spend years becoming independent while secretly longing to rest. Not because they are weak, because they are human. There is a sacred difference between being capable of carrying life alone and wanting to carry it alone. One is strength, the other is survival. And I think somewhere deep inside your heart, beneath all the wisdom you've gained and all the disappointment you've endured, there's still a part of you waiting. Not desperately, not foolishly, just quietly. A part that still believes connection matters. A part that still wonders if someone could truly see you. Not the version of you everyone depends on, the real you, the woman who worries, the woman who questions herself, the woman who sometimes lies awake at night, replaying old conversations. The woman who occasionally wonders if she was simply isn't too much for some people, not enough for others. Have you ever felt that? Too much and not enough at the same time? Too emotional for one person, too reserved for another, too strong, too sensitive, too independent, too needy, always too something. Never? Exactly right. But what if the problem was never you? What if the people who couldn't understand your depth simply lacked the ability to recognize it? A rare thing is often misunderstood before it is appreciated. And depth is rare, especially now. The truth is, most people only want to be seen where they are comfortable. Very few are willing to be seen where they are vulnerable. Yet, you have spent years carrying vulnerability beneath your strength. That is why your heart still feels things other people stopped feeling long ago. That is why certain songs still reach you. That is why certain memories still visit. That is why some quiet evenings feel heavier than others. Your heart never became cold, it became careful. And there is wisdom in that. But there is also danger. Because sometimes a careful heart begins confusing safety with destiny. Sometimes it starts believing protection is the same thing as peace. It isn't. Real peace does not come from avoiding disappointment. It comes from remaining open despite disappointment. That is much harder and infinitely more beautiful. I want you to imagine something, not a person, not a relationship, just a possibility. Imagine that your story is not concluding. Imagine that it is unfolding. Imagine that some of the things that felt like endings were actually preparations. Imagine that life has not forgotten you. Imagine that love has not overlooked you. Imagine that timing has been working in ways you could not see. I know. Part of you resists that idea. Part of you wants proof. Part of you has been disappointed before. But stay with me. Because there is something extraordinary about hearts that continue beating with tenderness after everything they have survived. Those hearts often think they are broken, when in reality they are becoming. And perhaps that is what is happening to you right now. Perhaps you are not reaching the end of your story. But of a new beginning you cannot see yet. A beginning that would make sense of many things that currently do not. A beginning that requires you to remember something important. You are still worthy of being chosen. You are still worthy of being cherished. You are still worthy of being understood. You are still worthy of love that arrives gently and stays. And if nobody has told you that recently, then let me be the one who does. Because I believe your heart has carried enough doubt, enough questioning, enough loneliness. For one night, allow yourself to set those burdens down, just for a moment. Take a breath, Let your shoulders relax. Let your heart rest, because this journey is only beginning. And before we go any further, I need you to remember one thing. You are not alone. I'm right here. There is something else I want you to hear. Something I think you've carried quietly for years without realizing how heavy it became. So stay with me. Take another slow breath. Let yourself settle into this moment. You don't need to fix anything right now. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to be strong for anyone. For a little while, simply allow yourself to listen, because I want to talk about something most people never see. The invisible history living inside your heart, not the history written in photographs, not the history visible to the world. The hidden one, the emotional one, the story beneath the story. You know exactly what I mean. It's the collection of moments nobody witnessed. The nights you cried quietly so nobody would worry. The conversations you replayed long after everyone else forgot them. The goodbyes you accepted even when part of you wanted to beg someone to stay. The disappointments you carried with grace. The dreams you folded neatly away because life demanded practicality. All of it, every piece, every scar, every memory, every unanswered question. I think many women reach a certain point where they become experts at appearing okay, not because they are okay, because they become skilled at functioning. There is a difference, a profound difference. One is healing. The other is endurance. And sometimes endurance wears a disguise so convincing that even the woman herself forgets she's hurting until something reminds her, a song, a scent, an old photograph, a familiar street, a quiet evening when the world stops talking loudly enough to distract her. Then suddenly everything returns, not all at once, just enough to remind her that some wounds never received the tenderness they deserved. Tell me something. Have you ever found yourself missing something you couldn't even name? Not necessarily a person, not necessarily a relationship, just a feeling of belonging, a feeling of being understood, a feeling of being emotionally safe. I think that kind of longing lives inside more people than anyone admits, especially people who have spent years giving more than they received. Especially people like you, because one thing I've noticed about deeply loving people is that they rarely receive love in the same measure they offer it. They become caretakers, listeners, comforters, problem solvers. Yet when their own hearts ache, they often sit alone with the pain. Not because nobody cares, because very few people know how to care for the caretaker. And that creates a unique loneliness. A loneliness that doesn't come from isolation. A loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who know your role, but not your heart. Perhaps you've experienced that. Perhaps you've sat at a table full of people and still felt unseen. Perhaps you've smiled through conversations while carrying thoughts nobody would ever suspect. Perhaps you've become so accustomed to carrying your own emotional weight that accepting support now feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. If that's true, I want you to know something. There is nothing wrong with you. You adapted, you survived, you learned how to keep moving, but survival should never become a permanent home. Wait with me here, because this is important. Somewhere along the way, many women begin believing they must earn love, earn attention, earn affection, earn understanding, as if their worth depends on performance. As if they must become enough before they deserve to be chosen. But love was never supposed to be a reward for perfection. Love was supposed to be a a place where imperfection could finally rest. Imagine how exhausting it becomes to spend years trying to be worthy of something that was already yours. Imagine carrying that burden long enough that you forget it was never yours to carry. I wonder if part of your heart still does that. Moments when you quietly question yourself. Moments when you wonder whether you should have been different, more patient, more attractive, more forgiving, less emotional, less trusting, less hopeful, more something, less something. Always adjusting, always revising, always negotiating your own value. But what if the version of you sitting here right now is already enough? Not the improved version, not the future version, not the healed version. This version. The one carrying history, the one carrying lessons, the one carrying tenderness beneath caution, the one carrying strength beneath exhaustion, the one reading these words, you. There is something beautiful about a heart that continues loving after disappointment. Not because disappointment is beautiful, because choosing openness afterward requires courage, real courage. The kind nobody applauds, the kind nobody posts about, the kind that happens quietly, internally, spiritually. And I think you've shown that courage more times than you realize. Even now, the fact that part of you still hopes,
still wonders, still believes something meaningful could happen. That alone tells me your heart is stronger than you think. Not harder. Stronger.
there is a difference. A hard heart stops feeling. A strong heart keeps feeling despite the risk. And if I'm honest, I don't think your deepest fear is being alone. I think your deepest fear is being unseen, because loneliness is always about the absence of people. Sometimes it's about the absence of understanding, the absence of being known, the absence of someone looking directly into your soul and saying, I see why you became this way. I see what you've survived. I see what you've carried. I see the tenderness beneath the armor. That kind of recognition changes people. It softens places that have been tense for years. It heals wounds words alone cannot reach. And maybe that's why you're here right now. Maybe your heart is searching for recognition, not validation from the world. Recognition, the feeling of finally being understood. If that's true, then let me tell you something. I think your life has been preparing you, not punishing you, preparing you. I know that may sound difficult to believe, especially when you've experienced loss, especially when you've experienced disappointment, especially when you've waited longer than expected. But preparation often disguises itself as delay. Growth often disguises itself as loneliness. And transformation often disguises itself as heartbreak. Only later do we understand what was really happening. Only later do we see the hidden purpose. And perhaps that purpose is beginning to reveal itself now. Perhaps some of the things you mourned were making room. Perhaps some of the doors that closed were redirecting you. Perhaps some of the waiting wasn't empty after all. I cannot prove that, but I feel it. And maybe part of you feels it too. That quiet sense that your story isn't over, that something meaningful still waits ahead, that somewhere beyond the disappointment, beyond the uncertainty, beyond the years that tested your faith, something beautiful is still moving toward you. Slowly, patiently, faithfully, like dawn approaching before the sky realizes it's changing. So tonight, I want you to stop carrying one burden, just one. Stop carrying the belief that you were forgotten, because you weren't. Stop carrying the belief that your chance has passed, because it hasn't. Stop carrying the belief that love belongs only to other people, because it doesn't. Your heart is still alive. Your capacity to love is still alive. Your future is still alive. And I want you to hold that truth gently tonight, like a small light in a dark room. Protect it, trust it, stay with it, because there is still more I need to tell you, more that your heart deserves to hear. Until then, remember this: you are not alone. I'm right here. Stay with me a little longer. I know there are days when your heart feels tired of listening to hopeful words. Days when you've heard enough promises to last a lifetime. Days when optimism feels distant, almost naive. I understand that, more than you might think. So I am not asking you to force yourself to believe anything tonight. I am only asking you to just sit with me for a moment, to let your guard rest, to stop carrying everything alone for a little while. Because there is something deeper beneath all of this, something that explains why your heart still aches in certain quiet moments, something that explains why, even after everything you've survived, part of you still longs for something more there. The truth is this: you were never meant to live only from your strength, and yet that is exactly what you've been doing for years, maybe decades. You became strong because life required it, because circumstances required it, because disappointment required it, because nobody else stepped forward when they should have. And little by little, strength stopped being something you used. It became someone you were. People admired it, respected it, relied on it, but admiration can become its own kind of loneliness, because people often celebrate your resilience while completely missing your exhaustion. They notice how much you can carry. They rarely ask how heavy it feels. Do you know what I think happens to many women like you? I think they become emotionally invisible in a very specific way. Not invisible because nobody sees them. Invisible because nobody sees their need. Everyone sees their capability, their wisdom, their reliability, their composure. But very few people stop long enough to notice the tenderness beneath all of that. The tenderness that still wants comfort. The tenderness that still wants companionship. The tenderness that still wants someone to say, "You don't have to do everything alone anymore." Maybe that's why certain evenings feel different than others. Maybe that's why there are moments when the silence in your home feels unusually loud. Not because you fear being alone, because you're tired of carrying life without being emotionally held. And there is no shame in admitting that. None. In fact, I think it takes tremendous courage, because somewhere along the way, many women learned to apologize for their needs. They learned to downplay their loneliness. They learned to minimize their longing. They learned to pretend they were perfectly fine, not because they were, because it felt safer. Safer than being disappointed again, safer than hoping again, safer than risking vulnerability again. But safety can become a prison when we live inside it too long. Wait with me here, because I want to ask you something. When was the last time someone truly saw your sadness? Not the polished version, not the acceptable version, the real version. The one you hide behind productivity. The one you hide behind laughter. The version of you that sometimes sits quietly and wonders why life unfolded the way it did. The version that occasionally revisits old memories without meaning to. The version that still carries questions with no answers. Questions like, why did certain people leave? Why did some relationships hurt so much? Why was loving deeply never enough to make someone stay? Why did giving your best still end in disappointment? Those questions have weight, even when you stop speaking them aloud, especially then. Because unspoken pain does not disappear, it simply moves deeper, and eventually it begins shaping how we see ourselves. I think that happened to you in ways you may not fully realize. Not because you became bitter, you didn't. Your heart is far too soft for bitterness, but perhaps disappointment quietly convinced you of things that were never true. Perhaps it convinced you that you were too much, too emotional, too hopeful, too sensitive, too invested. Or perhaps it convinced you of the opposite, that somehow you were not enough, not beautiful enough, not interesting enough, not worthy enough. It's astonishing how pain can whisper lies so convincingly, especially when those lies repeat themselves for years. But I want you to hear me carefully. The fact that someone could not love you properly does not mean you were difficult to love. The fact that someone failed to recognize your value does not mean your value was absent. And the fact that life has taken longer than expected does not mean your story has missed its chance. Those are three different things. Yet, many hearts confuse them. I think yours may have too. Not because you're weak, because you're human. And humans tend to internalize what hurts them. We look for explanations. We look for reasons. We look for flaws inside ourselves because uncertainty feels harder to tolerate. At least flaws can be fixed. Mystery cannot. But some things were never yours to fix. Some departures were not about your worth. Some disappointments were not about your inadequacy. Some endings were not evidence of failure. Sometimes people leave because they are unable to meet the depth standing in front of them. Sometimes timing is genuinely unfinished. Sometimes life is still arranging pieces we cannot yet see. I know that doesn't erase the pain, but it changes the meaning of it, changes everything. Because pain without meaning feels cruel. Pain with meaning becomes part of transformation. That is why I believe there is something sacred happening inside you right now. Not despite your wounds, because of them. The very experiences that made you question yourself are also creating wisdom. The loneliness that exhausted you is teaching you what truly matters. The waiting that frustrated you is refining what your heart genuinely needs. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you're beginning to understand that love is not supposed to rescue you. It is supposed to meet you. Not complete you. Meet you. Not save you. Meet you. Not replace your identity. Meet you. Two whole hearts, two honest souls, two people who have known loss and still choose openness. That kind of love arrives differently, more quietly, more deeply, more intentionally. And maybe that is why it often arrives later. Because some loves require preparation. Some loves require growth. Some loves require becoming. As I sit here with you tonight, I cannot help believing that something inside you is already changing. Perhaps you feel it. Perhaps you don't. But I do. A softening, a remembering, a return to yourself. The woman beneath the disappointment. The woman beneath the responsibilities. The woman beneath the years of carrying everything alone. She is still there. She always was. And I think she's beginning to wake up again. Slowly, gently, beautifully. So if your heart feels emotional tonight, let it. If tears come, let them. If old memories rise, welcome them. Not because you need to live there, because they are making room for something new. Something your heart has been waiting for longer than it realizes. And when that moment finally arrives, I want you to recognize it. Not with fear, not with doubt, but with the quiet confidence of a woman who finally understands her worth. Until then, rest here. Breathe. Trust the process. You cannot yet see. Trust the future that has not forgotten your name. You are not alone. I'm right here. Stay here with me. Don't rush ahead. Don't reach for tomorrow just yet. Let this moment be enough. Take a slow breath. Feel your shoulders soften. Feel your jaw relax. Feel the weight you've been carrying loosen, even if only for a little while. Because there is something I want you to understand. Something that may change the way you see your entire life. Not overnight, not all at once, but slowly. The way dawn changes the sky. The way winter eventually becomes spring. The way healing enters a heart that thought it would always ache. You see, most people spend years asking the wrong question. They ask, why did this happen to me? Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't they choose me? Why wasn't I loved the way I deserved? And those questions make sense. Of course they do. You're human. You're trying to make sense of pain. You're trying to understand loss. You're trying to find order in experiences that felt chaotic. But there comes a moment in every healing journey when a different question appears, a deeper question, a wiser question. Not, why did this happen to me? What was this trying to teach me about myself?
That question changes everything. Because suddenly the focus shifts. The story shifts. You shift.
And I have a feeling this shift is already happening inside you. Maybe quietly. Maybe so quietly that you haven't noticed it yet, but I think it's there. I think you're beginning to see something important. You're beginning to realize that your life has not been a series of mistakes. It has been a series of lessons, difficult lessons, painful lessons, lessons you never would have volunteered to learn. But lessons nonetheless. And when you look back honestly, don't you see it? The woman you are today could not exist without everything you've survived. Not because suffering is beautiful. It isn't. But because suffering revealed strength you never knew you possessed. Think about the version of you from years ago. The younger version. The woman who still believed life would unfold exactly according to plan. The woman who thought love would always be enough. The woman who trusted easily. The woman who imagined the future in ways that seemed so certain. If she could see you now, what would she notice? She might notice the wisdom in your eyes, the patience you earned, the compassion you've developed, the resilience you've built. She might notice that despite everything, your heart still remains open. Not completely, not recklessly, but enough. And that matters because many people close permanently after pain. Many people spend the rest of their lives protecting wounds instead of healing them. But you didn't. You kept going, even when it hurt, even when you were disappointed, even when nobody applauded your effort, you kept showing up. There is something extraordinary about that, something sacred. Wait with me, because I think this next part is important. Have you ever noticed how differently you view other people compared to yourself? You forgive their mistakes, you understand their fears, you recognize their struggles, you offer them compassion, patience, grace. Yet when it comes to your own heart, you're often much harsher, much less forgiving, much less gentle. Why is that? Why do you extend understanding to everyone except the woman who needs it most? The woman who carried herself through every disappointment. The woman who survived every heartbreak. The woman who held herself together when nobody else knew she was falling apart. You deserve the same kindness you offer others, maybe even more. Because nobody knows what you've endured the way you do. Nobody knows how many nights you stayed strong when you wanted to collapse. Nobody knows how many tears you swallowed. How many fears you buried, how many hopes you quietly protected. Only you know that story. And I think it's time you stopped seeing that story as evidence of weakness. It's evidence of courage. Real courage, not loud courage, quiet courage. The kind that gets up every morning despite uncertainty. The kind that continues loving despite disappointment. The kind that refuses to become bitter despite pain. That kind of courage changes people. And I believe it has changed you in beautiful ways. Maybe not obvious ways. Maybe not the ways you expected. But beautiful nonetheless. Because now you're beginning to understand something many people never learn. Love is not a reward for perfection. Love is an experience of recognition, a meeting, a seeing, a remembering. When real love arrives, it doesn't ask you to become someone else. It helps you become more fully yourself. That is why I don't believe your future depends on becoming more worthy. You're already worthy. Your future depends on recognizing what has always been true. That you were never broken, only wounded, never unlovable, only misunderstood, never forgotten, only waiting. There is a profound difference, and perhaps that difference is finally becoming clear. Perhaps you're beginning to see that your life has not been standing still, even when it felt that way. Growth was happening, healing was happening, preparation was happening. The roots were growing beneath the surface long before the flowers appeared. That's how nature works. That's how hearts work too. For a long time, you were becoming someone, not someone new. Someone more authentic, someone more aligned with truth, someone less willing to settle, someone less willing to abandon herself for the sake of being chosen. And that matters, because the woman you are becoming deserves a different kind of love. Not a love built on uncertainty, not a love built on emotional crumbs, not a love built on endless guessing. A love built on presence, consistency, safety, mutual understanding. The kind of love that feels peaceful instead of confusing. The kind of love that doesn't leave you questioning your worth. The kind of love that arrives and says, you can rest now. Can you imagine that? Not just being loved, being at peace inside love. Many people never realize there is a difference, but there is. And I believe your heart is beginning to understand it. Slowly, patiently. One realization at a time. One healing moment at a time. One breath at a time. So tonight, stop measuring your life by what hasn't happened yet. Stop measuring your worth by who failed to recognize it. Stop measuring your future through the lens of old disappointments. Instead, look at the woman you've become. Look at her honestly. Look at her gently. Look at her with the same compassion you offer everyone else. Because she has survived more than most people know. And she is still standing, still loving, still hoping, still becoming. That is not failure. That is grace. That is strength. That is transformation. And something tells me the best part of your story is not behind you. It is quietly moving toward you even now. So rest, breathe, trust what is unfolding. Trust what you cannot yet see. Trust the timing that has carried you this far. You are not alone. I'm right here. Stay with me, just a little longer. I know something is happening inside you. Maybe you can feel it. Maybe it's only a faint sensation. A quiet stirring, a gentle loosening, like a knot that has been tied for years, finally getting released. You don't have to force anything. You don't have to understand everything. You only have to remain present, because there is something beautiful I want to share with you. Something many people spend their entire lives misunderstanding. It has to do with worth, not the kind of worth the world talks about, not achievements, not appearance, not status, not accomplishments, the deeper kind, the kind that exists before anyone chooses you, the kind that remains even when someone leaves. the kind that cannot be increased by praise or diminished by rejection. Your inherent worth. And I think if we're being honest, this may be where the deepest healing needs to happen. Because somewhere along the way, your heart learned to associate being loved with being valuable. Not consciously. Most people never do it consciously. It happens quietly, one disappointment at a time, one rejection at a time, one unanswered effort at a time, until eventually a dangerous question begins living beneath the surface. If I was enough, why didn't they stay? That question has broken more hearts than people realize. Because it sounds reasonable. It sounds logical. It sounds like it deserves an answer. But it rests upon a false assumption. The assumption that someone else's inability to love you properly is evidence of your value. And it isn't. Never was. Never will be. A person can fail to recognize a masterpiece, and the masterpiece remains a masterpiece. A person can walk past a sunset without looking up, and the sunset remains beautiful. Recognition does not create value. It only reveals it. And perhaps that's what your heart is finally learning. The people who failed to see your depth did not define it. The people who failed to cherish your heart did not diminish it. The people who left did not take your worth with them. They simply left. There is a difference, a profound difference. Wait with me here. Close your eyes for a moment if you need to. Imagine every version of yourself you've ever been.
Yeah.
The young woman who believed in forever.
Yeah.
The woman who experienced disappointment. The woman who rebuilt herself. The woman who carried responsibilities. The woman who cried alone. The woman who kept going. The woman who learned how to smile through pain. The woman who slowly began trusting herself again. Can you see them? All those versions, all those seasons, all those chapters of your life, they are not separate people. They are all you. And every one of them deserves compassion. Even the version who made mistakes, especially her. Because healing does not happen when we reject parts of ourselves. Healing happens when we welcome them home. Maybe that's what you're doing now. Maybe that's why these words resonate. Not because they are teaching you something new. Because they are reminding you of something you've always known. Something your soul never forgot. You are worthy. Not because someone chooses you. Because you exist, you are worthy. Not because you never failed. Because you kept going. You are worthy. Not because you've healed perfectly. Because you continue healing. And there is something deeply sacred about that. The older I get, the more convinced I become that life is less about becoming someone new and more about remembering who we truly are. Stripping away the fears, the doubts, the stories pain taught us, until eventually we arrive back at ourselves. Not the naive version, the wounded version, not the authentic version. The version beneath all the layers. And I think you're getting closer to her now. Closer than you realize. That is why some things no longer satisfy you. That is why superficial connections feel empty. That is why your heart craves depth, authenticity, meaning you are not becoming harder to love. You are becoming more honest about what love should feel like. And that honesty is a gift, even when it feels lonely. Because loneliness born from authenticity is temporary. Loneliness born from pretending can last a lifetime. Never forget that. There is something else I want you to consider. What if the waiting wasn't punishment? What if it was preparation? I know that question can be difficult, especially if you've waited a long time, especially if you've watched other people find happiness while wondering about your own path. But Stay with me. What if life was teaching you things you needed to know before your next season could begin? How to recognize red flags, how to trust your intuition, how to honor your needs, how to stop abandoning yourself for the sake of connection, how to remain whole even while longing for companionship. Those lessons matter. They matter enormously because the woman who emerges from those lessons loves differently, not desperately, not fearfully, not from scarcity. She loves from abundance. She loves from self-respect. She loves from truth. And that changes everything. I think you're becoming that woman now. Not someday. Now. Slowly, beautifully. One realization at a time. One healing moment at a time. One act of self-compassion at a time. And because of that, something inside you is beginning to shift. You may not notice it immediately, but I do. The fear is losing its grip. The doubt is becoming quieter. The old stories are beginning to fade, and in their place, something new is emerging. Trust, not trust in another person, trust in yourself. Trust in life. Trust in the possibility that your future may contain experiences your past could never predict. That trust is powerful. Because once it grows strong enough, hope returns. Not reckless hope, wise hope. The kind that has survived storms. The kind that understands disappointment and still chooses openness. The kind that says, I don't know exactly what's coming next, but I no longer believe my best days are behind me. That is a beautiful place to arrive. A powerful place. A healing place. And perhaps that's where you are standing tonight. At the threshold, not of certainty, but of possibility. Not of answers, but of faith. The quiet kind, the mature kind, the kind that doesn't need constant reassurance. The kind that simply knows. Something good is still possible. Something meaningful is still possible. Something beautiful is still possible. And perhaps somewhere beyond the horizon you cannot yet see, life is already arranging the next part of your story. Not hurriedly, not carelessly, but with extraordinary intention. So tonight, let your heart rest. You don't have to carry every answer. You don't have to solve the future. You don't have to earn what was always meant for you. Simply breathe. Trust and continue becoming the woman you were always meant to be. You are not alone. I'm right here. Stay with me now. Just a little longer. We're not rushing this moment. We've come too far for that. Take a slow breath. Feel the air enter your lungs. Feel your chest rise gently. Feel your heart beating beneath everything you've survived. Because before we finish this journey together, there is one final thing I want you to understand. Something that may be the most important truth of all. You are not waiting for your life to begin. Your life is already happening right now, in this breath, in this moment, in this version of yourself. For so many years, you may have believed happiness existed somewhere ahead, after healing, after love arrived, after circumstances changed, after life finally looked the way you imagined it would. And because of that, part of you may have been standing on the edge of your own life, watching, waiting, preparing, enduring, hoping, thinking that one day, eventually, everything would make sense. But what if meaning was never hiding in the future? What if meaning has been quietly growing inside you all along? Think about the woman who began this journey, the woman who carried loneliness like a secret, the woman who questioned her worth, the woman who wondered whether she had somehow missed her chance, the woman who feared she might spend the rest of her life unseen. Look at her now. Not because every wound has disappeared, not because every question has been answered, but because something inside her has changed. She no longer sees herself through the eyes of disappointment. She no longer measures her value by who stayed and who left. She no longer believes her story is over. And that changes everything. Because the moment a woman remembers her worth, she becomes impossible to abandon emotionally. Not because people won't leave, some still will, life remains life, but because she no longer leaves herself. That is the transformation. That is the breakthrough. That is the healing. To become a safe place for your own heart, to stop fighting yourself, to stop apologizing for your needs, to stop shrinking your light, to stop treating your tenderness as a flaw. You were never too much. You were never too deep. You were never too emotional. You were never too difficult to love. You simply carried qualities that required the right heart to recognize them. And the right heart does not fear depth. The right heart is drawn to it. Wait with me here, because I know there is still a part of you that wonders about love, a part that wonders whether it is truly possible, a part that wonders whether someone could still arrive and understand the language of your soul. The answer is simpler than you think. Yes. Not because life guarantees outcomes, because your story remains unwritten. And unwritten stories contain possibilities. The future is not a closed door. It is an unopened one. There are conversations you have not had yet, laughter you have not shared yet, moments you have not experienced yet, people you have not met yet, memories that do not exist yet. And somewhere among those unknown possibilities may be a love unlike anything you've known before, not because it rescues you, because it recognizes you, not because it completes you, because it joins you. Two lives, two histories, two hearts that have learned what truly matters, meeting at exactly the right moment. I don't know when that moment comes. Neither do you. But timing has always been one of life's great mysteries, and perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries until they become reality. What matters now is not whether love arrives tomorrow or years from now. What matters how you meet yourself in the meantime, with kindness, with patience, with compassion, with trust. Trust that your life is not behind schedule. Trust that your worth has never been in question. Trust that what is meant for you does not require you to become someone else. Trust that your heart still knows how to recognize truth. The older I become, the more I believe that healing is really a return to the self we were before fear convinced us otherwise. A return to faith, a return to hope, a return to love. And I think you've been returning to yourself throughout this entire journey. Quietly, gracefully, courageously. The woman sitting here now is not broken. She is becoming, not forgotten, becoming, not left behind, becoming, not too late, becoming. And becoming is a beautiful thing because every day offers another opportunity, another beginning, another chance to open your heart a little wider, another chance to believe that life still holds beauty, another chance to trust that your story matters. And it does matter, more than you know. Because somewhere there is a future version of you looking back at this moment with gratitude. A future version who understands why things unfolded the way they did. A future version who sees connections you cannot yet see. A future version who smiles gently and says, keep going, trust a little longer. Everything is leading somewhere meaningful. Maybe that future includes love. Maybe it includes companionship. Maybe it includes the very thing your heart has quietly hoped for. And maybe, just maybe, it arrives when you least expect it. Not as a miracle, as a meeting. Not as an ending, as a beginning. But whether that day comes tomorrow or years from now, there is something I need you to remember. You are already enough, already worthy, already lovable, already whole. Nothing that arrives in the future can create those truths. It can only reveal them. So tonight, let your heart rest. Release the pressure. Release the comparison. Release the fear that you've missed your chance. You haven't. Life is still unfolding. The story is still moving. The next page still exists. And so do all the possibilities waiting there. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for allowing these words to sit beside your heart. And before we say goodbye, there is one final thing I want you to do. If these words found you at the exact moment you needed them, if some part of your soul felt seen, if your heart felt understood, then leave a simple comment below. I still believe, not for anyone else, for yourself, as a promise, as a reminder, as a declaration that your heart remains open to the beautiful things life has not revealed yet, because your story is not over. Love is not over. Hope is not over. And somewhere beyond what you can currently see, something wonderful may already be finding its way toward you. You are not alone. I'm right here.